Joining us now, Tyler Houlton, as spokesman for the NRCC. Tyler, it is good to have you with us now on America's Forum.
Well, thank you for having me, JD.
Tyler, we understand that having been through primaries and at times hotly contested primaries, there is the rhetorical notion that the end of all of this, yes, it may have been fiery, but we've come through the fire and we've come out stronger. Given the intensity and the nastiness of this Senate race in Mississippi, is it going to be tough to reconcile the backers of the respective candidates there?
No, I really don't think so. I think at the end of the day, regardless of how tough primaries can get, we need to check on Barack Obama, and we need to take back the Senate and put it in Republican control. I'm sure there's a couple issues between the two candidates, but the differences are far smaller than between anyone that's going to run as a Democrat. It seems to me that this president can't go a week without getting embroiled in another scandal. And I think regardless of who comes out of the Mississippi runoff, will be a fine senator when elected in November.
Well, let's move around the country to the upper Midwest, specifically to South Dakota. Mike Rounds winning the Republican nomination. Rounds is the former governor of South Dakota. He goes on to face Democrat Rick Weiland in this race to replace a Democrat incumbent. Typically, the Dakotas tend to be Republican country, although in North Dakota, despite all odds in 2012, a Democrat was elected. Is Mike Rounds a lock for the Republicans on the South Dakota Senate seat that's up for grabs?
Well, you never want to suggest that any race is a lock, but that's going to be a very good race for Republicans. I think Rounds comes out on top. Will make a great addition to the U.S. Senate again. And hopefully, at the end of the day, Republicans will take back the Senate, and ultimately we'll have two chambers to hold this president accountable.
Well, in Iowa, we saw Joni Ernst really reconcile both the establishment and the Tea Party. Widespread national support, so no runoff there. And now she faces incumbent Democratic Rep Bruce Braley, who got in a little trouble bad-mouthing the senior senator, Chuck Grassley, because Grassley, even though he's on the Judiciary Committee, horrors, is not a lawyer. Seems like Joni's got some momentum headed out of this race, especially with those memorable hog castration commercials.
And that's exactly right, and I think it's a perfect example of some of the Tea Party groups coming together with some of the more establishment folks and finding a candidate that both camps like. And with her success last night, Democrats are in big trouble in Iowa, especially Braley with the comments he made about Grassley. It shows how out of touch he is with Iowa farmers specifically, and that's going to hurt him at the end of the day, and I think that's going to be a great pickup opportunity for Republicans.
Okay, we've talked about some real pickup opportunities for the Republican Party in terms of Senate races, but an area of the country that was once, if not a Republican playground, then an area where Republicans did pretty well, both statewide and nationally, California, our most populous state. And Jerry Brown, back as governor, no problem. Obviously, he's the Democrat nominee. On the Republican side, former Treasury official Neil Kashkari, part of that difficult decision in 2008 to deal with the bank situation. Kashkari beats Tea Party favorite Tim Donnelly. When you take a look at California, how on earth will Republicans ever regain the governor's mansion in Sacramento?
Well, I think you need a solid candidate to do that. That's a very tough state for Republicans and has been for a long time. But I think eventually we can come together as a party and hopefully take that the governor's mansion back there. I'm more concerned about some of the House seats out there. We've got a lot of good Republican candidates running against Democrat incumbents who have really tied their wagons to Nancy Pelosi and Obamacare, and they're going to be in big trouble coming November.
Tyler, the challenge, of course, on the House side has been the gerrymandering that basically has taken place in California. in terms of the way the Democrats draw the lines and with their clear legislative dominance. Before we leave California, we would be remiss if we didn't take a moment to hear from Jerry Brown, the once and current governor, and odds makers say the future governor as well. Here is Jerry Brown on what kind of race he expects.
Fortune is fickle, and I would never predict the future. So I'm cautious. I'm going to do everything I can to merit the people's trust, and then in November, people will choose whether they want an unprecedented fourth term or not.
Wow, an unprecedented fourth term. He sounded so diplomatic until he got to that last line. And of course, if he does that, you think back about political history, and it was his dad, Pat Brown, who lost in a bid for a third term to a political newcomer by the name of Ronald Reagan. I don't know if Neil Kashkari can do that. We know it's an uphill battle. We'll leave it there. Let's go from California to big sky country, Montana. There's an incumbent Democrat, John Walsh, appointed to that seat when Max Baucus took a powder to become an ambassador. Steve Daines, the Republican nominee. Can this Montana seat end up back in the Republican column?
Yes, absolutely. I think that is one of the best pickup opportunities Republicans have going into 2014. You look at what Steve Daines has done just in his short term here in Congress. This has been a guy that fights for Montana values, fights for Montana families. And you look at the current incumbent senator has been there only a few months. He's part of Harry Reid's machine, and that doesn't work in Montana. It doesn't work in most states. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to see a Senator Steve Daines.
Well, Tyler, John Bachman here sitting alongside JD. We talked a lot about the Senate. We know the magic number for the GOP on the Senate side is 6, but I was wondering if you were willing to make a prediction on how many seats you're hoping to pick up on the House side this midterm election cycle.
Well, we have a program we just started. It's Drive to 245, which would give us one of the biggest majorities in the House for Republicans since World War II. That would have us picking up 12 seats. It's slightly ambitious, but it's doable if you look at the math. We've got races across the country where we have solid Republican candidates running against Democrat incumbents that just don't fit their districts. So I think going into November, if you look at places like in California, Iowa, Texas, all over Florida, looking all over the country, we have real opportunities to expand our majority and really hopefully work with the Senate that's controlled by Republicans to hold this president accountable and start producing real results for the American people.
So Tyler, and perhaps we should clue everybody in on the different acronyms: NRCC, National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, as opposed to the NRSC that deals with the Senate. So you are always working to elect more members of the House of Representatives. But Tyler, I have to ask you in all candor, because I've been a part of a previous House majority, and there's a lot of talk about dissension within the ranks, about a possible vote on immigration coming down the pike. We know that incumbents get together, that funding is important on the part of incumbents to bring in challengers. Spin aside, Tyler, can you give me the lowdown? Is there dissension in the ranks, or is every Republican member of Congress, regardless of what disagreements he may have with the leadership, doing his part in terms of helping out the NRCC in the effort for the upcoming midterm?
Well, I always think that dissension in the ranks here in the House is always overblown, a lot of times by the media because they enjoy the story so much. Yes, there's some disagreements on policy. There always will be, even in our party. But we've got a Big Tent party. We've got some, I think most people are committed to a step-by-step approach to immigration reform. We don't want a one-size-fits-all bill that's similar to Obamacare because we've seen how that turns out. So I think at the end of the day, though, everyone here realizes that electing more Republicans is good for us because even if we have slight disagreements over policy issues, it's far better than being surrounded by Democrats who disagree with us on everything.
Tyler, final question in the minute and a half that remains. You say it's a drive to 245. That's a dozen seats. You're taking a look at it district by district. Will that be a reality to build that Republican majority to the 245 you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I think so. If you look at the candidates again we have and what this president has done to tarnish the Democrat brand, I don't see Democrat turnout being very high this election season. And on top of that, you've seen poll after poll where people are sick of the president, don't feel like he is not leading us in the right direction. And that comes down to lower level candidates in the House that are running who are tied to Obama, to Obamacare, and his other failed policies. So yes, I do think 12 seats is clearly can be accomplished, and I think we'll figure that out on Election Day.
Well, Tyler, in your drive to 245, we reserve the right to call you back and talk about some of those races in the days to come. In the interim, sir, you have our thanks for giving us an update from the Republican viewpoint there in Washington, D.C. Thanks very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you heard Tyler right there. Can the GOP?
12 seats.
A
That
dozen
would be
seats.
a slap in the face to the Obama administration. More, not more so than having the Republican Party take control of the Senate, but definitely would send a message.
We'll see what happens there, and you'll see us again following this timeout as America's Forum continues.